The referee's a podcast with Jack and Kelly too. Scottish Championship pass, they give us a show. Footy tales from the pitch, controversies that scratch. Every moment they'll itch, no call left to bash.
Here we go again. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Referees a Podcast and a different start to this week's episode because it's me, Jack Curry, kicking things off, and I'm joined as ever by the wonderful Cameron Smith. Cammy boy, how you doing this week?
Yes, doing very well, thank you. Yes, you touched on it there, slightly different start to this week. Jack won't have heard it because there's clearly a slight issue to be ironed out with that for next week. Cutting in just a touch early, but we worked out that this wasn't quite perfect in the build-up. Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of the most professionally produced podcast detailing the Scottish Championship. How are you this week, Jack? Are you ready for some, sit around for an hour talking about the Championship and its vast mediocrity?
Absolutely. Mediocrity, come on, having any of this. We're here to promote the Scottish Championship. You know, as you said, not only are we the most detailed, I think you'll find we are the only dedicated Scottish Championship podcast. So listeners out there, if you're enjoying the content, if you're catching us on YouTube, give us a like, give us a share. If you're catching us on Spotify, if you're an OG, if you've been here since episode 1, we appreciate you. We love you all the same. And Cam, it's the best place to be because, it's been another massive weekend full of ups and downs. There's been all sorts happening. My jaw dropped at some results on Saturday. Disappointing for my side, Thistle. But there's been a whole heap of stuff to talk about, which we'll get on to. But it's just been another massive week of championship action, isn't it?
It's true. Yep. There's been many. Well, I suppose it's actually been one less than usual. But no, it's been good. Some crazy ones for sure, which we'll certainly get onto as the day goes on. The first one was maybe not so surprising. Well, I suppose if you consider everything that's gone on with the St Johnstone recently, it's potentially slightly surprising, but they went out 4-2 winners away in Arbroath. A little bit of a return to form for them. They have been struggling in recent games to score multiple goals, never mind necessarily taking all 3 points. This game they've scored 4 goals, taken 3 points, a tough place to go. What do you think about the game?
Yeah, I think a really, really, really impressive result here by St Johnstone, and for a number of reasons, Cam. You touched on it there. Gayfield's one of the toughest places for any side in the division to go. Let alone, as we spoke about last week in the podcast, the Gale Force wins in Storm Dave, which was coming in and sweeping the country, and I think they certainly felt that kind of throughout wherever you were on Saturday. So you take all that and taking account, as you touched on there, it was back-to-back draws for St Johnstone coming into this one. Thistle had closed the gap all the way down and were breathing right on their necks, and then you look at Arbroath taking the lead in that game, and then when St Johnstone got themselves in front to make it 2-1, Arbroath pegged them back instantly and made it 2 each. You get St Johnstone with 25 minutes to go, still found 2 goals to make it seem a comfortable win. So I think if you're a St Johnstone fan, if you're Simo Valakari, it's an absolute perfect result for you on the day, and we'll get on to it, coupled with Thistle dropping points down at Somerset.
Yeah. No, 100%. Big game, and actually quite a lot of potential changes to the order of the league happened this weekend. This game being quite a pivotal one, like you said there. Obviously, St Johnstone managed to eke out a little bit further of a lead. But let's very briefly look at Arbroath. Now, we'll get on to Dunfermline a little bit later on. I think we said even maybe just last week that Arbroath are pretty safe in third position. They're still in third position by 1 point. Dunfermline have a game in hand as well. Have Arbroath managed to throw away third position?
I mean, it's starting to kind of look like it, but it's one of those ones, Cam, where I spoke about it last week or a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about when they travelled away to Morton. And that mindset they are both players, and from us on the outside, it felt as though they didn't really have anything to play for because they had third place thrown up, and they can kind of just focus on the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're obviously still going to finish in the playoff positions, but I think what's happened is as much to Dunfermline showing an outrageous level of form. They are now the form team in the league. You look at their last 6 games, there's 5 wins in there and a draw.
Yeah.
The big criticism we had about Dunfermline all season was, as soon as we back them, as soon as we start saying they're good, they fall off a cliff. It was inconsistency. But Neil Lennon, it's ever since they had that moment in the Scottish Cup, everything else just seems to have clicked in the league. And it's a worrying time, when you look at the playoffs, because albeit, they're a distance away down there in 4th, but if they're going to continue this form going in, firstly, Arbroath certainly won't be going into the playoffs smiling anymore.
No, 100%. Like you say, Dunfermline finally picking up a bit of consistency to go along with their performances, meaning that their recent run has been mighty fine for them. I'm sure they'll be looking at it, licking their lips at Arbroath in 3rd place as they're just closing the distance in between. But no, massive. Obviously, we'll get on to Dunfermline very shortly. But for the time being, Arbroath look mighty sketchy, and like you say, they'll certainly be highly, highly likely to be in the playoffs, both Arbroath and Dunfermline. But Dunfermline, the way they're looking at the moment, it's going to be a tough opposition for Arbroath to come up against in that playoff match. Obviously, we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but it does seem pretty likely at the moment that the 3rd, 4th place playoff match will be between Arbroath and Dunfermline. It's just, I suppose, who's going to be home first will be determined, but a tough game for Arbroath, losing at home, but all things considered, they are league leaders. St Johnstone coming back to form a little bit, so I'm sure they can't be too hard on themselves on that. They did get 2 goals, like you say, managing to come back into St Johnstone a wee bit, but obviously in the end St Johnstone just a little bit too much for them to manage. I suppose we should probably talk about the other team in the title push, which is yourself, Partick Thistle, not managing to get the result that you were after on Saturday away to Ayr. You managed to make it to the game. Walk us through it.
Cam, you're right, I did, and it was ended up being a really up and down, topsy-turvy and afternoon of emotions, if I'm being brutally honest, down at Somerset Park. It's been a brilliant time, and it's been a brilliant season being a Thistle fan, particularly in the last few weeks. When St Johnstone have dropped points and we've picked up wins and really closed that gap. And as you just said there, really, really, really made it a title fight. And there's that steel and good resolve, in the Thistle team. As it's been well documented, it's just such a shame that we've got the injuries and we're lacking that real bit of squad depth just now. And it was one of those performances where, as I mentioned it last week on the podcast, every single Thistle fan would have much rather Scott Brown was still in charge for that game. And I think when I spoke last week about how John Rankin would set Ayr United up, it would be very much, we're not losing our first game. And he set them up, very defensive. And didn't really, look to try and create too much going forward. The one thing I will say before I get on to it is I genuinely really struggle watching a football game, and this is not just including my team. This is multiple games. Just watching any general level of football, but especially my team when Ross Hardy is the referee.
Right.
I know, because sometimes, Cam, you mentioned last week you feel as though the standard of refereeing was a particular issue.
Yeah.
I really, really, really try and stay away from talking about referees and blaming referees and pointing the finger at situations, because ultimately I always think there's a kind of bigger picture. And if you're disappointed at the result, most of the time the result lies away. I'm not blaming him for the result, but the performance that he regularly puts in is shocking.
Yeah.
the 2 yellow cards that he gave Lee Ashcroft were extremely harsh. They were essentially trips that I genuinely would say 9 out of 10 referees, would probably give warnings to for both.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the second, and the first as well, and you've seen it right at the time in front of me, and you watch back, he wasn't going to book him until the Ayr United players came over, and then he obviously gave the penalty away, and it was a clumsy incident in the box, and it did look, at the first angle as though Luffrey's, clawed him down, but when you see it really in full, Anton Dowds has got his arm wrapped around Luffrey's back as well, and it's essentially a 50-50 nothing. And I always hark back to I left a game last season early just because I was so angry watching Ross Hardy officiate against us.
Yeah.
And that was Falkirk away when Brian Graham got sent off. And I really hate having the mindset, but it's genuinely so difficult watching a football game where the referee constantly wants to be the centre of attention.
Yeah, for us, it always feels it's Wilson. What's his first name? Lloyd Wilson or something like that. But every time I see Wilson as the referee, I just know that it's not going to be a good game. I'm going to keep an eye out for Hardy as the remainder of the season and presumably into next year. But yeah, no, you can't obviously paint them all with the same brush. You certainly get some referees out there who, generally speaking, make good decisions. They don't get swayed too much by players running up to them. However, you can't make any point about that, being that you are the team who had Brian Graham doing that for years, and he was so successful at it, which was what was so frustrating for everyone else, But it's tough when there's no real consistency to the level of refereeing. A free kick given by one referee, you can be pretty certain that not every one of his colleagues would give the same free kick. It's I don't know how you go about fixing it. I don't know if it's the quality of I don't know. I honestly don't. It's just, I suppose, different people approach things in different ways, and you're never going to be able to get that too consistent. But I suppose it's just part and parcel of football, isn't it? You take some, you win some, you lose some, and sometimes the ref goes your way and gives you a light penalty or sends off someone, and sometimes it happens to you. I suppose it's part of the excitement of the game to a certain extent.
Because I'm just looking, because there's actually a great website here, and this is the last I'm going to make on referees' points and Ross Hardy in particular.
About this.
But there's a page here, the Thistle Archive, which is great. It lists all the stats, anything to do with Partick Thistle,
right.
And this has got all the games that Ross Hardy's refereed for Partick Thistle, and in all the games he's gave Thistle 1 penalty, he's gave the opposition 5, he's gave Thistle booking 23, and he's gave 20 to the opposition. So just leave it at that. That's all I'm going to say in the matter.
I think you should have left the yellow card fact out, because that makes him seem reasonable. The penalty fact, see if you'd lied it with the penalty fact and just left it there, I'm agreeing with you. As soon as you said the yellow card fact, I'm like, well,
anyway. But it's one of those ones,
Those 3 yellow cards were just 3 of the 5 penalties.
Yeah, well, St Johnstone obviously got the win. Jamie Murphy scored the penalty for them, and we dropped back to 5 points before games to go. Never say never, but it obviously looks now like it's very much going to be second for us. Which is still fabulous. As I keep harking back to I bit your hand off for that at the start of the season.
100%.
So yeah, I'm not going to be disheartened at all, and it's certainly going to be nice to see other teams have to fight it out in the first round of the playoffs, and we get to be the team that sits back, and obviously we're both losing. It was one of those ones where, as you said, even if Dunfermline overtakes them, it doesn't really change the outlook of us for the playoffs, because you're still going to play one of them anyway.
Yeah, so exactly. So no, like you say there, it does make winning the league just look that slightly bit tougher. certainly not impossible. Certainly not impossible by any stretch. Could still do it easily, but it would take a good chunk of fortune for yourself and a little bit of misfortune for St Johnstone. So at the moment, that's the way it's looking. St Johnstone to win the league. Thistle to finish second, and then either Arbroath or Dunfermline. But as mentioned, still plenty of football to go, and we may as well now look at Dunfermline because that's the next one up. They were victorious on Saturday, 3-1 at home to Martin. Looks like it must have been a fairly standard event for them. They've went out, they've put out what appears to be quite a strong team. Obviously a few people to pull out for their performances this year is the Todds in whatever capacity they're playing, whether it's the brotherly pairing or the extra Todd. You always seem to see them popping up, whether it be goals, assists, doing the business, and they've done it again here against Martin. It's looking pretty good for Dunfermline, as you mentioned. Creeping their way up the league with a really nice patch of good form. They found the consistency they've been missing all season. Is that all down to the manager? Has Neil Lennon finally got them going, or is it a case that the team's started to gel properly now and they're playing a bit more as a unit?
Well, I think it's probably a mix of those things, Cam. I think the manager's definitely got a big thing to do with galvanising the squad, and kind of give them the confidence. I think Dunfermline fans will probably point to now this is where, for me at least, looking from the outside in, they're starting to have a full quota of players, not as many injuries as what we've always heard. And I think the one big difference for me, Cam, was the signing of Aston Oxborough in January and goals. I think Dunfermline, for me, one of their biggest issues was always at the back.
Mm-hmm.
And you always felt as though the keepers had a mistake in them. They were always going to concede in a game. And obviously not saying they're keeping clean sheets week in, week out with Oxborough, but I think he probably is, a level above, coming down from the Premiership. So I think he was a really astute signing for them in January, and I think he's done really, really well for them, and probably gives the rest of the players in front of him, that wee bit of confidence, because I really don't think it can be underestimated just how good a good goalkeeper can make, not only for the defenders but for the midfielders and the attackers as well. To have that freedom and that confidence and that belief that if they make a mistake, there's a solid foundation behind them. So I think he's been a real pivotal signing for Dunfermline, and Dunfermline fans would love to hear your opinion on that and on him, and tell us, are we right, or what's your opinion on why he's done so well since really January onwards? Is it to do with the Scottish Cup? Is it confidence? Is it Lennon? What is it?
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point there. That signing did sort of pique my interest when I saw it go through. I did think of that at the time as, like you say, a good signing for them, giving them that little extra bit of confidence at the back. And, it's like you've mentioned, that allows the the centre-backs to push on a wee bit and maybe not worry quite so much about having to be back the entire time and protecting against anything, because you don't have that confidence that the keeper can be called upon. But like you say, gives them that wee bit of confidence and allows them to get more involved in the going forward, and therefore scoring more goals, which we have seen from Dunfermline as of late. They're not necessarily always just winning by 1-0 or 2-1. They do score 3 goals quite often now. So yeah, I think whatever they're doing, it's going very well for them, and it's putting them in a mighty good position as you go towards the end of this season. You never know with the playoffs at this level. Anyone has a chance of getting through the playoffs. Certainly tougher for the third and fourth place teams, having to play a total of 6 games if you're wanting to get promoted, but it does happen. We've seen it before, and we will see it again. Is it this year? Who knows?
Exactly. That's going to be the beauty of the playoffs. We're still going to find it all out, and we're still going to have the excitement of all of that to come, Cam. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. But there's one monumental result from Saturday that
huge.
We must talk about. It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And I don't think even anybody could have predicted this, no matter how bad County have been. Ross County 0, Airdrie 4.
Yeah.
Take it away, Cam. What do you make of that?
Oh, I mean, what can you say about it, really? We talked about it last week as being a crucial game for whoever won. I think most people probably would have expected some sort of dull draw, 0-0, one each. The potential of someone sneaking maybe a wee 1-0 victory. I don't think anyone looking at it on the face of it was going to say that Airdrie were going to go to Dingwall and win 4-0. We all know that Ross County's home form has been, particularly poor. But that really takes the cake, doesn't it? 4-0 to the team who were bottom of the league at the time. A crucial game. This could be the game that ultimately sinks Ross County for a double relegation, back-to-back relegations, and not, even just, they had a poor season and they lost in the playoffs and went down. It's looking very, very likely that they're going to be last place in the championship, straight all the way down. I mean, Stuart Kettlewell was blasting them, the players and the squad and their mentality and everything after the game, and I don't know what else you can do at this point. I think they must have decided all of a sudden that that's it. We're done. We're going down, and let's just give up now.
I mean, to continue on what you were saying there about Kettlewell, Cam, he called it the worst result in the club's history.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of speaks volumes, when you say Ross County are staring at back-to-back relegations, in the face. We spoke about it last week. The only chance, realistically, either of them had of surviving and finishing, 8th was if Airdrie won and then won their game in hand.
Yeah.
So for the fact that they've done that, if they do win their game in hand, you could be talking about Ross County being as many points as Thistle are away from St Johnstone as to Ross County would be from 9th.
Yeah.
And that's a mental thing to consider. So at this point, Ross County look absolutely doomed. If Airdrieonians though do lose their game in hand, then obviously it still remains at 2 points, and the Ross County are very much in it, but they truly deserve to go down this season.
Mm-hmm.
They've been shocking.
Yeah, I agree with that fully. I think they are the team that deserves to go down. Even if they do in the end go down by a point or the 2 points that it is just now, you can't say that they've deserved 2 points more than they have at the moment. They've just been absolutely terrible. 6 wins out of 32 with a team who, at the early point in the season, the chairman at Ross County described as being better than the team that they had last year, due to the investment that they made. So I don't know what happened to that team that guy was seeing, but it's not the team that we've been seeing all season long.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely just crazy when you think of the back day comments, because I forgot about that, but you're right, and it's absolutely mad, and when you look here, Cam, I'm on a list here of just looking at all of the signings that Ross County have made this season. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like when you're genuinely here, when you're looking at all of the players that they signed, either at the start of this season or in January or on loan or just at some point, Cam, there's maybe like 20 players here.
Yeah.
And I'm not even joking. There's so many more than you would even think or remember or expect, or loans or frees or this or that. Guys that I wouldn't recognise, but they've signed them, and I think that's Ross County's problem right there in a nutshell. Is for season after season they got away with it. Just chucking money around, getting players up, making it work for half a season. Some move on, they get rid of the crap, get the same cycle over and over and over again. And at some point, that's just not going to work because it's not sustainable, and they're kind of reaping what they deserve in that aspect. I think the thing for me, looking at the issue Ross County have got just now, is when you've seen the highlights from that game, Ross County's attendances have obviously never been, the most amazing for obvious reasons. Dingwall's not a big place. Let's not kid ourselves. But there was hardly anybody, in that stand in particular behind the goal for Ross County. When you've seen the goal going in for Airdrie, and I think that must be the most worrying thing, is if they start losing the fans and they start losing the attendances and the crowd, then that's when it's going to go seriously wrong.
100%. Football is based on the fans. Realistically, if there's no fans coming, especially teams at our level and below, that's big. You need people through the turnstiles paying the tickets, whether it be season tickets or just paying on the day. Every club needs that income coming in, and they very quickly notice when the fans stop turning out in their numbers, because the person at the club starts to dwindle and empty. So not a good position for Ross County, and obviously for all the fans of the club, it's horrible to see, but something needs to happen with the way that they've been doing things over there. Like you say, they've been throwing money at the problem for years, just trying to survive. And it was probably easier to get slightly better quality players when you're trying to survive in the top league than trying to survive in the championship. And I think that's maybe the problem. They've used the same strategy, but without being able to bring in the same quality players that they were able to do before, which what they realistically ended up doing was actually just bringing in more deadwood and paying them money and expecting them to do the business and save them, when it's just not happened for them. And now they've ended up with this bloated squad who can't find a win to save themselves. So yeah, rough position for them, and a rough weekend. We'll get on to the next game in a wee while, but first we had another midweek game this week there. Ayr United playing against the team we've already discussed as being very good and on top of their game at their moment, Dunfermline, who managed to put 3 goals past Ayr United as well. 3 unanswered goals this time, though. There was no respite in the shape of a goal for Ayr United. What Ayr United got instead of a goal was a red card for their troubles. So not only did they lose 3-0 at home, but they also have a player suspended for, it looks like it was a straight red card there, so presumably 2 games. I've not seen the incident, so I don't know what that was, but what are your thoughts on the Tuesday night game? Obviously, we've already talked about the teams, so we'll keep it to the game itself.
Yeah, I mean, really impressive result on the night. As you said, we've kind of sort of spoken about both teams at length, so we can just sort of gloss over this one. But yeah, Dunfermline Athletic, Tuesday night away from home, coming away with a 3-0 at Ayr United, it is very, very impressive. You must say so, despite, obviously, John Rankin and Ayr United's troubles. And I think before the match, when I seen the lineups going out, there was, I think, 3 or 4 players from the Ayr United team that started against Thistle that were injured.
Right.
Dowd was out. I think Jamie Murphy was out. Somebody else, at least, there was a few players that were out. So I think they were suffering with quite a few injuries. So yeah, it was one of those ones where, it was obviously a disappointing result for Ayr United on the night, and they've been tumbling down the league. So another kind of unhappy day for their fans.
100%. Yeah, no, it wasn't very good for them. It doesn't help Ayr United in their position. At the moment, we've got 4 teams on 36 points, Ayr United being one of them. And up until that, the games that have happened since our last podcast, Ayr United previously had a game in hand on everyone. Now Ayr United is one of the teams on 32 points, with a bunch of teams in and around about them with a game in hand on them now. So Ayr United are now looking not great at all. 36 points with 32 games played. Queen's Park and Wraith Rovers can pull 3 points clear if they win their games in hand. So Ayr United not in a pretty position. The one thing that's potentially working in their favour is obviously they do still have 6 point of a gap to Airdrie in 9th. Yes, Airdrie do have that game in hand, but points on the board is certainly more advantageous than a game in hand. So for the time being, gives them that little bit of breathing room. But that question starts to prick its head up again if Airdrie win their game in hand and Ayr United don't pick up some kind of form. What do you think about where Ayr United are going to end up as the season finishes?
I think the next 2 games are actually, when you look at who Ayr United have got left, it's actually really, really interesting here because obviously they've got Arbroath. We've spoken at length about Arbroath. Kind of dropping form slightly. They then take on Ross County. They then take on Airdrie, and then they've got St Johnstone in the final game. So it's a really, really kind of make or break, if you like, kind of run in for Ayr United. I think it's really going to test the players' bottle and resolve. I think especially if they pick up a win against Arbroath, I think that kind of eases everybody's fears. I think if you're the team that gets to 39 points, you're as you said earlier, 38's by far the safety marker this year. So I think if you get to like 39 points in a win out of those 4 teams, you're safe. But if you keep losing and losing and losing between now and the end of the season, and you're going to end up on 36, it does give Airdrie that opportunity to perhaps do it.
Definitely, especially if you've mentioned there they play Airdrie in their running. Airdrie win their game in hand and beat Ayr United. That's them on the same points. The only thing I would say about Airdrie, though, but yeah.
The only thing I was going to say about Airdrie, though, right, before they play Ayr United, their 3 games go St Johnstone away, Dunfermline at home, and Thistle at home.
That is tough.
So if Airdrie are going to do it, they're going to upset somebody at the top.
Yeah.
So, there's ramifications here at both ends of the table. Could we see one of Thistle's biggest rivals, Airdrie, get a win against St Johnstone and, do Thistle a favour and turn the title fight back at the top on again? So anything could happen, Cam, in this league. It's so exciting.
You're right. And that
kind of leads us on to the fixtures.
Yeah, we've seen what's happened. Now let's look at what is happening. Starting off with the Friday night game. Big one for what's happening down the bottom end of the table. My team, Queen's Park, at home to Ross County on the TV Friday night. This game, well, not this game specifically, but this fixture previously was supposed to be the one on BBC. But if you all remember, that game got, I was going to say snowed out, but I think it was frozen pitched out. And that game was later replayed, and Ross County beat us in that game. So we were certainly looking for a wee bit of revenge. I was listening to the manager's pre-game interview, and he was saying that the county game was the last time we lost at home, and that was the first game that we had lost at home for 6 or 7 games at home at least. So he's been making a big point about home form and really wanting to make Lesser Hampden a tough place for other teams to come. So as a Queen's Park fan, we'll certainly be hoping that we're able to show Ross County a bit of a harder time of it than we did last time, and hopefully manage to get 3 points against what is a struggling Ross County team, and a Queen's Park who's slightly more buoyant and in a good chunk better form than they were 2-3 months ago. So should be an exciting one, and obviously with it being on the television means other people outside of the direct sphere can have a wee watch, and anyone who's not able to fit in the 907 capacity Lesser Hampden are able to have a wee watch of that. So anyone at home listening to this podcast, get your TV on 7:45 to BBC Scotland and have a wee gander and see if it's something that you would like to watch again.
Absolutely, Cam. Absolutely, lovely plug for the BBC coverage there on the Friday night. And as you said, that it's massive. Every win, now that a team gets against Ross County just goes ever so closer to that back-to-back relegation. So. Yeah, monumental game for both teams there. And then we've got 4 on Saturday, Cam, and then 2 happening on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then, so I kind of sort of briefly mentioned this game earlier on, but, Ayr United, 3rd game in a row at home for them. Interesting how the fixture list can obviously work out. Host Arbroath. Obviously, well documented how bang out of form Ayr are. On Arbroath side, with back-to-back defeats against their name. How do you sum up both teams coming into this one?
It's a really tough one, actually, this one. 2 teams not playing where they should be. 2 teams with, good quality squads. been able to do the business at different times throughout the year, but just not quite able to find it at the moment. Obviously, Ayr United in a bit of turmoil. New manager at the helm. Even if he is just a temporary manager, a lot of poor results of late. But obviously, Arbroath's situation hasn't been too much better as of late. So I don't know where to go with this one. I think for me as a Queen's Park fan, with everything that's going on down at the bottom end of the table, I think I'd obviously prefer an Arbroath victory in this one. But I honestly don't know. I honestly can't think of who's going to win that one. So that's a wait and see one for me.
Yeah, I think you're actually spotting the money there, Cam. It's a really, really, really difficult one to call. It could, almost go either way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then that leads us on to Firhill. Thistle taking on the informed Dunfermline, which is set up to be a fantastic match down there. So yeah, no, really looking forward to that one. Obviously, I've spoken at length all season about Thistle's good home form. At this point of the season, all we can do is try and win our games between now and the end of the season and hope that St Johnstone slip up. But go into this one, hope to welcome some more players back from injury. Listening to Super Scoreboard last night, I heard Tony Watt saying that he's pretty close to being back, if not back for this weekend. So that's obviously looking really, really promising. And if we can have Cam, a few players back, Chalmers potentially, and etc., and just get that more proper first 11 back with a wee bit of flair up front, then it would be really, really nice to go into the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. It's always rough when players are out, especially big key players like Tony Watt. So big for yourself if he's able to come back. It's obviously a massive game, as we've talked about. Dunfermline at the moment, form team. Yourselves haven't ever really not been in and around the form. So certainly an interesting one to watch. Will you be making it to this one? Sorry if you said that already.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping to make it to this one, so I should be there come Saturday afternoon, which will be really, really good.
Excellent stuff. You'll have to let us know next week how you got on. Moving on, we've got Wraith Rovers against Morton. What can you say about this one?
Yeah, I know. Well, obviously, it's we've kind of sort of made the point before about Imrie coming up against Morton, etc., etc.
And Murray coming up against Wraith as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm only going to make comment on it because I can't not. But obviously the incident of what happened at Firhill and
yeah,
Rovers fans.
I had wondered how long it would take you to get into it, if I'm honest.
It's one of those ones where obviously we want to concentrate and talk about the football. Says the man that probably spent a good 5 or 10 minutes talking about a single referee earlier on. But when you seen the post come out, seeing the vile and disgusting racist graffiti, directed to a good friend of mine's, and somebody that I've known for a long, long time, and to then see obviously the destruction and the money caused. I mean, that's almost a sort of secondary thing because of course it's shocking and the damage, and the clubs will pay for that. But that the actual, it really was just left such a sour taste in my mouth. So just talking about Wraith Rovers now, I can't really move on without commenting on it, and it goes without saying about how disgusting it all was.
Oh, 100%. No one's excusing the actions at all. Obviously, there's stuff behind the scenes, presumably that's sort of led up to this, but you never like to see that, do you? Especially, Partick Thistle, to a certain extent, going out their way to allow the stadium to be used for the KDM Evolution Trophy, and obviously being stung by it is the the real horror story here. It's the fact that you've went out your way to help another two teams, an organisation do your bit for Scottish football, and have it thrown in your face by some really outrageously disrespectful fans who fingers crossed we don't see in and around the game anymore, but it's the way that football's going again. It's almost harkening back to the sort of 80s and 90s era, hooliganism, sort of creeping their way back in. But I suppose that is always going to be part and parcel of football, isn't it? When you've got a bunch of passionate people, sometimes they go too far and they make the wrong decisions, and that's obviously a certain aspect of what's happened here. So really sorry when I heard that and I read about that. So fingers crossed you're able to get the damage and everything sorted out fairly soon, and it's not going to cause the club too much of a financial burden or issue, because as we've talked about many times, even today, money at this level is tough. So to see anything like that happening is completely outrageous, and yeah, fingers crossed the people responsible get what's coming to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for an absolute note, there was damage in the Inverness Cali Thistle end of seats as well, from their kind of ultra section or whatever you want to call it. So it's just ridiculous, Cam. I think you made the perfect point. Thistle hosted, allowed that cup final to be held at our stadium. Done a good thing, to do that. And I think it's just we idiots breaking seats and doing what they've done is just unacceptable on every single level. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm getting more annoyed about it the more I think about it and speak about it. So Wraith Rovers fans, you'll just need to excuse me, but that's where we're leaving you here for this week. St Johnstone though, Cam, taking on Airdrie. Obviously on paper, you would expect St Johnstone to win this. Obviously they got their impressive result against Airdrie. How many more wins do you kind of give it? Do you just kind of think, St Johnstone 2 or 3 more wins and obviously that's them won the league?
Well, yeah. I mean, what
obviously 3 wins does, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, obviously 5-point gap at the moment. So, 1 more win, it's looking very likely. 2 more wins and you are done. That's that, right? You can't scoop up, I suppose, depending on how the other games go, and but
2 wins and 2 defeats does give Thistle an opportunity to win the league.
Yes, but the percentages, the percentage chance gets increasingly smaller. It would obviously take St Johnstone losing their presumably I've not even looked at their final fixtures. What have they got left?
So their games are, they've obviously got Airdrie at home. They've then got Dunfermline away, Wraith Rovers at home, which I will say they played Dunfermline on the Tuesday and then Wraith Rovers on the Friday.
Yeah.
That's obviously quite a quick turnaround. And then their last game's away to Ayr.
Oh.
So, we make this point every week because it's true. There's no easy games at this level.
There's no easy games, but I think St Johnstone to lose 2 of those games would be quite unlikely.
It wouldn't be surprising if they lost away to Dunfermline.
No, that's the one that I think they'll have definitely the most trouble with. The rest of them, though, look a little bit nicer for them, but it's all speculation. There's no point going, oh yeah, they might win that one and they might not win that one. We've got to take it a game at a time. The game that we've got to take at the moment is at home against Airdrie, and yeah, it's tough to look past St Johnstone in this one, especially after their result. But can't take away from the fact that Airdrie went away to Dingwall last weekend and won 4-0 there. So I suppose we'll wait and see what Airdrie shows up, and to some extent what St Johnstone turns up, because they've not been the all-conquering team in the second half of the season that they were in the first. So any team on their day can be any other team in this division. This could be an upset for the ages, in terms of how it could end up in the division this year. But that marks the last Saturday game. Like you said, we do have 2 Tuesday games, starting off with Airdrie again at home to inform Dunfermline. Any thoughts on this one?
Again, really, really interesting, Cam. I think for Airdrie, they're going to be the team down at the bottom of the table that you're really probably going to look at, to see,
Yeah.
if they can pull it off. So obviously, their focus is on St Johnstone at the weekend, but they're on for another massive game at home against Dunfermline on the Tuesday.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of big games. Obviously, at this point, every game's a big game, especially the makeup of the league and where everyone is and the points that they're all and where everyone can still finish. There's no one at this moment is guaranteed in the position that they're in. Not a single team. So yeah, a lot to play for as the season goes on, which is nice because it means that no game is a dud game, as it were, like we were talking about with our Broth in the last few weeks. Nothing to play for. Everyone has something to play for, essentially, at this stage. So very exciting there. And obviously, you said you didn't want to talk about it, so I'll take this one. The last Tuesday game, Queen's Park against Wraith Rovers. This is quite big for us. Obviously, this is the game in hand that we have on Ayr United, on Morton, and if we're still counting Ross County, the game in hand on them as well. So certainly a chance for us to propel ourselves up maybe another place or two with a victory there. So obviously a lot of this depends on what happens on Saturday, but a big game for us at home on Tuesday, and once these games are over, that's 33 games on the board, 3 games left to play. So the games this weekend and midweek feel pretty pivotal, don't they? You could maybe see a little bit more of an idea of where people are finishing after these games are over and done with.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a few teams sweating above the dotted line there in mid-table, so as we've spoken about, wins are going to be crucial, especially when teams are playing against each other. So, as you said, Cam, it's going to be so interesting to see how the next couple of weeks unravels.
100%. And then that takes us quite nicely on to the predictions. We don't actually have any to review this week. We're waiting on both of those Tuesday games before we can review the last week's.
Right, I see.
Sorry, 1 second. So I was having trouble remembering my passcode to get into my iPad. So yes, we've got 2 weeks waiting for those results on Tuesday. We still have to predict those, so we'll get those after. We'll start with the Friday night game. It is me to start, as it is an odd week. So, what am I thinking? Queen's Park against Ross County. I think that it's going to be 2-0 Queen's Park.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the sentiment of a Queen's Park victory. I'm going to go 2-1 Queen's Park.
2-1, that's locked in, no problem. Next up, Ayr against Arbroath. Really tough one, and I still have been thinking about this since we previewed the game, and I still have no idea even what way I'm going with it. I think due to that, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw here.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument, Cam, for any result in this game. I'm going to, though, give Arbroath a wee bit of credit, and I'm going to go 2-1 Arbroath.
Yeah. My first initial thought was Arbroath, but they've just been that poor recently that I just can't see myself fully backing them at the moment, but I suppose it is against Ayr, so you never know. But mine's locked in, 1 each. You've got 2-1 Arbroath victory. Thistle against Dunfermline next. Now, this is a really tough one. Obviously, Dunfermline, right good form at the moment. Partick Thistle, always good form at home. I think I'm gonna back yourselves, and I'm gonna go just a 1-0 victory for Partick Thistle against Dunfermline.
Yeah, I echo the sentiment, Cam, of it being a close game, and I do also think it's going to be a close Thistle victory. I'm going to go 3-2 though. I'm going to predict some goals
high
at Firhill, I
scoring.
think.
Yeah, I mean that's probably quite a good shout, to be fair. Next up, Wraith Rovers against Morton. Neither team are setting the world alight at the moment. I think I probably back Wraith Rovers just pure and simply because they're the home team in this one. So I'm going to go 2-1 Wraith Rovers.
Yeah, again, I think this is another one where you could probably make an argument for a result either way. So I'm going to do what you did with the Era Broth game and go for a draw, but I'm going to say 0-0.
0-0. There we go. No problem. Then last up for the weekend game, St Johnstone against Airdrie. I am going to go for a 3-1 St Johnstone victory.
I'm going to let my heart rule my head on this one, Cam.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to try and encourage an
Yeah.
Airdrie win. So I'll say 2-1 Airdrie.
No problem. So we'll just recap these ones before we move on to the midweek ones. Queen's Park against County. We've both taken a Queen's Park victory. I've went 2-0. You've went 2-1. Ayr against Arbroath. I've taken a 1-0 draw. You think Arbroath are going to win that one 2-1. Thistle against Dunfermline. We've both taken a Thistle victory at home there. I've went 1-0. You have went 3-2. Wraith against Martin. You've taken them a 0-0 victory, a 0-0 draw in that one. I've taken a 2-1 Wraith Rovers victory. And the last weekend game, St Johnstone against Airdrie, I've got St Johnstone to win that one 3-1, whereas you're taking Airdrie for a 2-1 victory. First midweek game is Airdrie against Dunfermline. I think... I don't want to keep just discounting Airdrie because of that game against County, but at the same time, am I putting too much salt into that victory against what is the worst team of form in our division? I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one.
Yeah, again, I think this is going to be quite a tricky one to predict, Cam, especially, if Airdrie have still got their tails up. But I'm going to go for a Dunfermline win. I'll say 2-0 Dunfermline.
No problem. And the last midweek game there, Queen's Park against Wraith Rovers. I make this one tougher one than the County game. I'm going to go for a 1-0 draw.
That's exactly what I was thinking, and I'm just going to stick with my gut.
Yeah.
1 each.
No problem. So the two midweek games, I've taken Airdrie for a 2-2 draw with Dunfermline. You've got Dunfermline to win that one 2-0. Then we both think the Queen's Park Wraith Rovers game is going to be 1 each on the day. And that concludes the predictions.
Fantastic, Cam, fantastic. And I just remembered I have got a comment to address from a St Johnstone fan.
You do.
But very kindly.
I got it up.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I got it up, remembering it also.
Do I read it out for the listeners?
Yeah. So user 111588568898 left us a nice comment here saying no way Saints' wage budget is double that of Thistle. Tony Watt's pay poke on its own will be massive. So Jack, would you like to respond to 111588568898?
Well, I love your smoothly, readable username there. 115 something fucking 98. But no, I thought your comment, obviously, I probably made a flippant comment about St Johnstone's wage budget being double this. So it probably won't be far off it. It would be double, but it probably won't be far off it. However, making a comment about Tony Watt's wages, listen, son, his wage won't be that high at Thistle. He makes his money on socks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the sentiment that you were trying to make at the time, which is that St Johnstone's budget is significantly higher than Partick Thistle's budget. I think it's probably wise to not die on the hill of it is 100% double. But yeah, I think we can probably all safely agree that St Johnstone, certainly after the business that they conducted in January, are presumably spending a good chunk more on wages than most other teams in the division, except maybe Ross County.
Absolutely, which is the absolute crazy thing about it all, and especially the compensation Ross County have dished out. So so listeners, if you want us to read out your comments, if you want a wee bit of interaction, that's what we're here for, that's what we live for. If you were part of the YouTube spike we had last week and you're joining us again, let us know, give us a wee bit of feedback, let us know who you support, because we're always interested in finding out a bit, and always interested, Cam, in learning out about our wonderful listeners and audience.
Too right. 2 right. So yeah, like Jack says, give us a rate in. If we notice the comment in time, then we'll certainly include it in the episode. This one should have probably actually been out in last week's, but you live and you lose some. So no, thank you all very much for listening to our little podcast here. I've been Cameron Smith, and I'll talk to you all again next week.
Have a fantastic weekend, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you next week for another bumper episode. Have a good one.